So in direct contrast to an American style meeting in Wall Street, where you would sit down and they would take an egg timer and turn it over. And if you wanted to talk about your family, would say, well, Robert, we don't need to do that. That was $500 worth. Very, very different. We had American CEOs come into China and want to do the wham bam thank you ma'am and failed miserably because the Chinese were put off, they were insulted. And I guess the concept is that in different cultural settings, I think that was part of the topics that we wrote about with Pagoda, in different cultural settings, there are different ways to achieve success. So if the American way is wham bam thank you ma'am, we don't want to know who you are or anything about you, sign here and please go away, that's fine. And that can make you maybe very successful in Wall Street, but that doesn't work in China. And the interesting part about it is it doesn't even work now in China. So can I see a show of hands of who has ever been to China or who is doing some work related to China? I see Randy, I see Paul. Randy, you can unmute if you want. No need, okay. And my concept here, ladies and gentlemen, is much more of a fireside chat where we can get to know one another a little bit. And really, it's a bit ironic, I have to admit, I'm trying very hard. When I arrived in China 40 years ago, nobody had a telephone. You needed ration coupons for your food, which they would refer to as liang piao and you piao. And there were no cars. So I got a Phoenix brand bicycle. And that was kind of the Cadillac of bikes. It was a big deal. And I took my Phoenix brand bicycle to the local noodle shop. And you needed to have your renminbis, and they actually had special currency for foreigners called Waihui Zhuan, the foreign exchange certificates. And you needed your ration coupons because the rationing had to do with how many pounds of rice you could get in a month, how much cooking oil you could have, maybe similar to the potato famine in England, in Ireland. And I went in and I did the needful. They all knew me at the shop because I used to go there quite a bit. But this was the first day I'm proudly riding my bike. And I parked my bike, went in with my buddies to get my noodles. And when I came back out, to my chagrin, my bike was gone. And having a bike missing back in those days, not everybody had a bike, was similar to having your car stolen. And I was looking very troubled. And one of the old lady security guards, they used to call them the Hongbin with their red, kind of a red piece of cloth over their arms, saying security guard. And they were kind of old grandmas that would be looking after the neighborhood from the neighborhood committee, came over to me and said, young man, what's the matter? To me, for sure, what's the problem? And my response was, my bike, with the juicing job, I can't find my bike. And the woman looked at me and she said, 1 minute. And she went running away. And she found her way, came back 5 minutes later with a policeman. And the policeman looked at me and he said, 警告你, that means I'm warning you, this time I'm going to allow you to have your bicycle back. But next time, make sure you park your bike in a bike parking zone. I was illegally parked in a no parking zone for bicycles. That's kind of, and to see the growth and development from that time. When I wanted, first of all, I would love everybody to at least say hello, so I know that I'm talking to people. It's ironic to be having a topic about the importance of personal relationships in China. And when I talk around the world, we try to develop relationships with the other people. The Asian style of business, still to this day, even though you can live your life on WeChat, even the guy on his motorbike so you can cut through traffic. When you get on the back, he doesn't want your renminbi. He wants to scan your phone to pay. You can book your meals. You can get a taxi. You can book your airfare. You can send money to friends. So everything can be done on your phone. But that the Chinese have had an ability, which is, I think, quite remarkable, to have very, very modern technology without removing the human touch. So even when I go back and meet the big shots of Alibaba and Tencent technologies, which are similar to Google and maybe Amazon, it doesn't matter that they're running these trillion-dollar techno companies. They still want to break bread. They want to know who you are. They want to spend time together, which is part of the Chinese ritual. They actually, when they talk about that, talk about keqi, which means polite, and they talk about li mao, and they talk about Jedi. Are the people who are there, can we at least say hello so we know who we're talking to? Because otherwise I feel like this is ground control to Major Tom.
So Robert, we've got some people coming into the chat here, and what I'll do, so we can go around, and if you'd like to introduce yourself, you're more than welcome to, but I've also just launched a poll so we can kind of see where people are from in the world, just continent wise. And then if you're representing a company, if you're a student, if you're someone else, you can answer that as well, and I'll share the poll details.
All right, well, that'd be good, but if they like, they should feel free to say hello. I encourage them to do so, because like I said, I do this around the world in many different universities. I've done it for the US-China Business Council that's done a write-up about me recently. I always tell the audience, very similar to the Asian, hello? Hello?
We can hear you, Robert. We can't see you though.
Okay, I still see the poll. Let's see, how do we get rid of that? There we go. I always tell the audiences, hold on a second here.
I'm just sharing the results of the poll there, so we can still see and hear you. But just to get an idea, most people are from North America, a couple from Asia, and a lot of people representing a company or as someone else. So that's quite,
okay. All
quite
right. Well, that sounds
interesting.
good. All right. Does anybody want to say hello or not?
Well, I'll go ahead and introduce.
Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Jerry. Nice to see you.
Good
morning,
Jerry,
Robert.
You got to get a new hat, though, Robert.
what's that?
You got to get a new hat.
All right. Anybody else like to say hello? Rodney?
Good morning, Robert. This is
Yeah.
Andrew.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Andrew.
Robert,
you-
yeah, good morning. This is Rodney, California guys. Thanks, Robert, so far for your help with us getting set up in China.
No. I'm thrilled that you can join us, Rodney. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Rodney
I'll
is,
say, oh, Paul, do you want to go ahead? I'm sorry. All right, I'll go
Oh, no.
ahead. All right, in the interest of full disclosure, I've known Mr. Fish for how many years? Before we were born, decades, 40 years, 50 years.
like that.
And I have done international trade law and regulation for most of those years. I'm semi-retired, but still there's always more to learn, and Bob Fish is the one to learn it from.
Well,
So
thank you. I paid her for that, guys, just so you know.
they were buying it. They were buying it. Stop it.
Okay.
Hi,
And
Bob.
Andrew, nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. My camera went on the fritz after an earlier meeting, so I'm sorry you can't see me, but I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Andrew is a China expert who does some wonderful writing about China as well, so it's nice to share. And Finn, you said Nitai Shenzhen Traba. Finn?
Yes, I am working in Shenzhen right now.
Excellent, excellent. Not locked down then, right?
Yes, it's quite open.
Good, excellent. That's a good thing. When I first arrived in Shenzhen, it was just a fishing village with 100,000 people. And since there was no cars, there were no telephones, there were still dirt roads. The only choice that you had was to get face to face with the people. So my excuse for being an internet immigrant rather than an internet native is that that's how I was weaned. We met different Chinese officials, we got to know them and so on. To illustrate this concept of the importance of respect, even in modern China now, they call that 互双尊重. That means that you have a mutual respect. And there's the idea of 客气, 礼貌, and Jedi, 客气 being politeness, 礼貌 is etiquette, and Jedi means to host. I would go to small villages in China. And when they knew that they were going to be hosting an American, it was a really big deal. So they would, it was embarrassing to me, they would go out of their way because the salaries were so low at that time. They would go out of their way to borrow a month's salary in order to buy a chicken, because the staple diet back in those days was mostly a lot of vegetables, a little bit of rice, and a lot of tofu. So I had to make sure that when I went to visit these people in the village, the next time around, because they had become my friends, that I did not let them know that I was coming, because there would be no concept, no opportunity for them to fuss and to go way out of their way to borrow money from friends to make me a banquet. Now, compare and contrast. I was helping out because the city of Hangzhou and Boston were sister cities. And at that time, the local mayor in Boston, Mayor Flynn, when the delegation came with the mayor of Hangzhou, had decided that China was not important enough of a country. It was just a poor communist peasant country. They weren't worth the time to pay attention to. So the mayor and his delegation, when we arrived, the mayor of Boston would not meet with them. The local state senator met with them for 15 minutes and sent them on their way. So at lunchtime, rather than having a formal banquet where you show respect, 尊重, where you are polite, 客气, 礼貌, and where you are hosting properly, Jedi, and 人情味 to get to know one another, that was not going to happen. They sent us off to the government building, the McCormick building, to eat off of plastic trays. And they were able to have tuna fish in plastic wrap. And the Chinese officials, who would be used to a tea ceremony, which is very intricate and ornate, instead had to learn how to take a plastic cup and push it into that ice machine. They had never seen that before. So you can imagine the feeling of being welcome to try to create relations that basically nobody would talk to them, and they weren't worthy of even, let alone accompanying them for lunch, but actually doing something nice, putting out your best foot forward. So what I did, I was extremely embarrassed understanding the cultural implications. So the mayor of Hangzhou said to me, you know, Robert, maybe the problem here is they really haven't warmed up to us yet. And I said, well, let's see what we can do. So I hired a van, and I had around 15 officials from Hangzhou, and I brought them back to my house in the suburbs of Boston. And I organized with my wife's a very good cook. She is a Hakka, a Kejia Chinese. And they say in China, the woman is definitely the boss. And only if you fear your wife will you be prosperous. And if you're not prosperous enough, you need to fear her even more. So she cooked a big banquet. We had nice wine. We hosted them in my home. And for them, the fact that it wasn't just a government department, but we were opening up our home to them. And I'm a frustrated performer. I play the piano. So we sat around the grand piano and we sang Chinese pop tunes together. Now, for the American style, they might be scratching their head and saying, is this guy a fruitcake? What's the matter with him? Why is he wasting time like that? What a waste. It's not efficient, you know? But actually, if you don't take the time and the effort in China to get to know the people and to show some respect, then your business won't be successful. And I saw that over and over again in my 40 years of dealing with the Western businesses and Chinese businesses and the Chinese government. So what happened that really highlights this concept of Hushuangzhuanzhong. Andrew, would you say that Hushuangzhuanzhong is a critical element of Chinese culture? I can't hear him. Andrew, are you there?
Oh, sorry. Absolutely.
Can we see you or we can't see you?
I'm having problems this morning. I apologize.
Okay, well, Andrew's a China expert, so he's probably laughing at some of my stories here.
No,
But
no.
Bob, can I support your thesis with a professional story of my own?
Wonderful,
all
that's what
right.
we want. We want a
Okay,
fireside chat.
so
That's great,
fireside
please.
chat. So at one point in my career, I think it was more or less when I met you many years ago when I worked for Motorola. And I had oversight for the paging division, which sounds funny now because pagers are history, but at the time it was a $3 billion a year business. We had a factory in Tianjin, and we were having trouble with the customs officials, which I won't go into the details because I'll bore the life out of all of you, but we were negotiating with them so that they would abide sort of by the global platform of importation. But, you know, we hired somebody specifically whose job was relationship building. And that was her only job and made all the difference. We wound up saving $40 million a year. So it is not time or money wasted. It is a tremendous return on investment and well worth it. And it's human. I mean, not just from a business perspective, but from a, you know, we're all on this planet together perspective. So it's sort of a win-win. End of
There
story.
you go. That's a great story. What do you think, Andrew?
That's wonderful. I mean, you can't argue with the results that Randy got received on that. That's terrific.
Now I have to add in another story. Matt, are you there? Matthew?
Yeah,
Matt-
hey, Robert, I'm here.
All right, can we see you or you don't have the camera going?
I don't have the camera right now, but I can talk.
Okay, no, that's great. Anyway, you know, I want from the student population out there, I want them to know that even though my generation, my children who are, one is starting medical school and one has now applying to medical school. They both call me a dinosaur or a konglong in terms of technology things. And I have a young, very bright, very successful Google person, Matthew Robb, who's helping me to do a lot of modern things and to bring me into the modern age. So the concept is that I need to embrace change, even though I was weaned on a culture where we need to talk and get to know one another. I kind of made a deal with him that he'd meet me halfway, which was I'm now on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. So I urge the young crowd to check me out. For an old guy, I think we're not doing bad. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, it's definitely going well. I made the video, like the promo video that was shared. Don't know if any of you saw that, but yeah, we have a few followers. The YouTube's YouTube's got
anyway,
1,000 videos on one of the videos.
But when I had students from around the world, for me, that was very uplifting in several ways. And the concept was not only did we break the ice and get to know one another as people, and then I was able to help those students who were looking to go to China or to do business with China. And I'm proud to say many of them have gone to do very well. One of them got a full scholarship for his MBA from Price Waterhouse. Another one is working in Capstone Gemini and a fancy consulting firm in London. But they came and spent time with me in the trenches in China. So it wasn't just telling them about it. They actually went with me in and out of Chinese ministries, which helped them to understand the concepts that we're talking about. And I appreciate, it's very hard to break the ice if nobody says hello, but that's okay. would anybody else like to at least say hello? That would be great. Yeah,
Hey, Robert,
yes,
let me ask you something. Many years ago, I worked for a company called Cummins Engine, and
yes,
I was part of a negotiating team that was negotiating a contract, a licensing agreement with a company called Komatsu in Japan. Now, this is
right,
not China, but it's Japan and it's
okay,
Asia. And I'm wondering whether or not in China the same situation develops.
okay,
We were told, be careful when you sit and talk with them that you really understand what they're telling you. Because, for example, the word yes in Japanese has 3 separate meanings. Yes, I heard you. Yes, I agree with you. And yes, I understand you. Does that
absolutely.
situation
Uh,
occur
uh,
in Chinese dialects as well?
Absolutely. You know, one of the biggest problems that we faced before in China was that you'd have American corporations going and spending several years trying to get things done unsuccessfully because they weren't, first of all, they didn't understand. And second of all, they weren't even talking to the right people. So being able to break the barrier, get the respect going. So I wanted to tell and the other thing is that I think similar maybe in Asian cultures, there's a concept of people don't want to lose face. So they'll do anything to try to avoid losing face. So even if they don't understand, Jerry, it's quite frequent they'll nod their head and say yes, and just say yes and yes and yes. And yes doesn't mean yes at all. So being able to find the right people, get to know them, break the ice, and they have to feel comfortable with you first. So on the flip side of the mayor of Hangzhou being snubbed in Boston, picture, if you will, and it's not long after the Cultural Revolution and not long after Nixon opening up, that when I arrived back in Hangzhou, the mayor himself, which was a little bit dangerous in those days because the relationship with China and America was just getting started. You didn't want to be seen as an evil capitalist roader or a Zogoja or a Zubinjui Jaja, right, Andrew?
Correct.
Okay, so that was so critical that the fact that he came to pick me up in my little Chinese barracks style apartment, and he didn't come to get me in what they call the Hongqi, the red mobile, the red flag Communist Party car. He came in his own car, which is very unusual. And he then proceeded to bring me home, which was even more unusual. It was a little bit risky. He was kind of putting his neck out there. He brought me home to drink tea and to drink tea with the neighbors. And then after, and I was just a young guy working in Project Hope, which is similar to the Peace Corps. I was the liaison. It was a health project. He proceeded then to bring me to the state guest house for a 15-course banquet where they carved the cucumber to look like a peacock and they carved the watermelon to look like a panda bear, you know, where they go to that level of detail to return the respect. So having that mutual respect is so critical in getting things done in China. And it's not saying that that system is better or worse, but if you want to be successful over there, then you need to use a different approach. Similarly, you know, there's different ways of doing things in America. It doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different. So I had a project for British Petroleum, BP, and they were building the single largest investment in Zhuhai. And it was for a PTA factory, a purified terephthalic acid factory. This is a polymer used in making Coke bottles and so on. And they had an entire vessel of pipes coming from Italy. Technipetrol was the supplier. And the people in the warehouse in Italy just said, well, it's ready, send the shipment out. And they had chartered an entire vessel. So this vessel was happily sailing its way to China, but without an import license. And typically what that would lead to is that they would impound the vessel. They would get large demurrage penalties, which could be up to, in those days, it was a lot of money, maybe $50,000 a day, for example. And you'd be blacklisted, and the project probably wouldn't get off to a very good footing. And it would be problematic because it wasn't only the fact that they didn't have the right paperwork. The perception from the Chinese side was that you don't respect us. You don't pay any attention to the way that things are being done. So I met with the president of BP, and he said, Robert, we don't know what to do. We hope you can help us out. So I went into, first of all, I identified the district commander of customs. Now, Andrew, imagine me trying to get a meeting with somebody of that senior level in America. It's not happening, correct? Andrew? No way.
You'd probably have trouble getting your foot in the door there. Yes.
Yeah, it would definitely be a May Banfa situation, right? So
Where there's a will, there's a way. I've also done those things. So yes, I concur. But you gotta have the right stuff. So, and Bob has the right stuff. Carry on.
So anyway, what I did is I got in the elevator and I looked to my left and right and I said, Laoban Bangong Shi Zai Nali? Where's the boss's office? And they said it's on the 3rd floor. So I went on the 3rd floor and with much authority walked very steadily and quickly right into the guy's office before all of the gate guards could stop me because they didn't know what the hell was going on. It was probably the first time that specific area in Zhuhai had seen a foreigner like me. And I walked right in, and the guy looked up at me like, what did the cat bring in? The loving way that they would refer to us in Finn will understand. They used to call us Yanggui, or in Cantonese, it would be Guilo. And so what's up with the Yanggui? Where did he come from? How did he get in here? So I sat down, I opened my mouth, started speaking Chinese. The guy was so shocked, huge smile over his face, and he said, okay, guys, bring the tea ceremony, bring the tea set, let's go. So you're sitting at looks like a tree trunk that's carved, and then they have a whole ritual for the tea ceremony. So imagine, guys, that everybody in that audience that's meeting today was forced against their will to have to sit and talk to me at a table at the first meeting. And you have to do it for several hours. So we sat, and then they have a special pincers to put the tea leaves in, and then a small teapot, and they fill it up, and they put a little bit of hot water on top, and they pour it into the pouring cup and the smelling cup, which is known as the Wenshang Bei. So you smell the essence of the tea, and you're going through all of this ritual. And at the same time, not only was I speaking Mandarin with the guy, but he was Cantonese. So I threw in a little bit of Finn. Finn. No?
No,
Anyway.
sorry, I cannot speak.
No? So
我唔識
anyway,
講廣東話啊。
你老家是哪里呢？
From the Guangxi.
Oh, Guangxi. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
So anyway, speaking Mandarin, speaking Cantonese, and we spent the next, believe it or not, Andrew could appreciate, we spent the next 2 hours just getting to know one another. So if some of the students here are feeling nervous and wondering, why am I not straight to the point and telling you about business or this and that with an agenda? It's not how it works in China. So when I'm advising my clients, they have to come along and join the journey, or it doesn't work very well for them. So I proceeded, then we shared stories about our families, where he grew up, his struggles during the Cultural Revolution, where I grew up, and getting to know one another is such an important part, and Jerry will agree, having done things in Japan, it's such a ritual part of the behavior that if you want to be successful, that's the way. Andrew, do you have a story to share about that one?
Not off the top of my head. I apologize. I was just trying to fix my camera and it's still not working. So I think I'll pass on that one. I apologize.
No worries. So being able to understand this ritual that is still important today. So then I invited the president of BP to come along and to join the party. And I warned him in advance, bring pictures of your kids, because the Chinese like children, and be sure to spend some time not telling him, hey, I'm the CEO of the biggest oil company on earth. You know, this, what was perceived by the Chinese as I'm the great white hunter, you know, my shit doesn't stink and you'll listen to what we tell you, kind of a thing. I briefed him on some of the cultural awareness things, and he was very flexible. He sat down and spent, again, it was a 2-hour chat just to get to know one another. Now, just to note, this commander, this senior commander, had stopped by the BP office unannounced, which was very, very common in those days. If you didn't have a telephone, you didn't always need to make an appointment, right? So if you just showed up somewhere without an appointment, the people understood the ritual. They would stop what they were doing and they would host you. And that was what was done. What happened, and it was ironic, is that the receptionist had been trained by the American HR manager. Don't let anybody in without an appointment. Send them away. Let's repeat this. You understand, when people call on the phone, that's what you should do. And there was this group of young, well-heeled, wealthy, sophisticated Chinese who thought that taking on this air of arrogance was very shishi, it was very cool, it was hip, it's what you should do. So you imagine this commander shows up and the receptionist says, sorry, go away. You're not welcome. So we weren't really, could you picture that, Andrew?
也特别不礼貌。
Yeah, not great. So here we go. And so the guy was already pretty angry with us to start with, but my then bringing over the CEO to pay his respects was huge. Understanding Chinese culture, though, and knowing that there's many different levels and ranks of the bureaucracy. If I only showed respect to the boss, but not the port commander, he would feel snubbed. And even though they wouldn't give me a terrible time, they could still make it hard along the way, knowing eventually they're going to have to do it because the boss is involved. But they could still muck you around. So I then went and did a similar routine, meeting the port customs commander. And we sat and we did the tea ceremony, and I invited the president, CEO of BP with me. And again, he might be thinking, what the hell is with this? I had to spend 2 hours there and 2 hours there. Time is money. I need to get back to my computer. Sorry, guys. You asked me for help. Either I'm going to help or not. You choose. So then, okay, go ahead. Randy? Can't hear you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to go. I have my next thing happen, and so I
Okay, no
apologize.
problem. Take good care.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
for being
everybody.
here.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. So we went and then met with the local port commander, after which I organized a banquet. Because again, every big Chinese deal that I know about in you always get to know the people and the bosses. They want, is that right, Finn? You get to know the people, you eat together, right?
Yes.
Very, very important for 搞好关系, 搞一点人情味. And so Finn, are you now in Shenzhen?
Hello?
Are you in Shenzhen now?
Yes.
Great,
In
great.
Nankan district. Okay.
You feel free if you'd like to share a story.
I
Not-
prefer to be a listener,
No
actually.
worries, no worries.
Okay.
And TL, how are you this morning? TL, are you there? All right,
Yes. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Where are you now?
I'm in Dalian, China, in the
You're
Liaoning
where?
province,
Oh, you were in Dalian. And where are you from originally?
Belgium.
Ah, c'est fantastique, monsieur. Ça va bien.
Ah, vous parlez français.
Je parle français, je parle 8 langues. J'aime beaucoup de
Wow.
langues.
Wow.
And what are you
Um,
what are you doing in Dalian?
So I came here to study first, and now I'm like working.
Excellent. Where do you work?
I have my own company, so I do like translation, content creation, consulting, that kind of business.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great. When I'm coming back to China, we can get together.
Yeah, of course, definitely.
I would like that. I would like that. Do you have any stories you want to share? Because now you're there and you're actually doing it. That's great.
Actually, nothing comes to mind, but like, if I think of something, I'll tell you.
Good. Feel free to jump in. So the ending of this story is that I then arranged a banquet and I invited the 5 key commanders in that region of Guangdong and Zhuhai. I had also the CEO of BP and his executive board, and I was kind of the spokesperson. And I introduced the 2 sides, and I said to them, we are so honored to be here working in Zhuhai, and we appreciate all of your support. We want to learn from you. You are the teachers, we are the students. Again, this concept of humility, which is a little bit different than Wall Street. And we hope that we can learn the rules and regulations properly. Please be patient with us, right? And then they introduced themselves. Our side introduced themselves. We had good wine. We had good food. We had a nice banquet that we arranged in a nice hotel. And because I'm a frustrated performer, I was up on stage singing Chinese pop tunes with the district commander. So my theory is that if you can get people singing together, and better yet, maybe singing and dancing, you can negotiate just about anything. Can you imagine me going into a government department in America and trying to sing a song? They call the men in the white coats, right? So anyway, the follow-up story was that this entire vessel of pipes was happily steaming its way to the Zhuhai port, waiting to be impounded, waiting to pay demurrage penalties, and so on. And I went to the commander with my hat in my hand, very humble, and I said, Ling Guanzhang, 我很惭愧，很没有面子的事情。I was saying I'm very embarrassed. Vessel of pipes on its way, and the Americans did not understand that they needed an import permit. So we really don't know what to do. We don't want to spoil the relations. We don't want to spoil this project because it is a very much of a spotlight project for Zhuhai, the single largest investment ever. So we don't want to get off on a bad footing, both for your side and our side. What should I do? And he took out his pen and his chop. TL will understand the concept of the chop. Yes, TL?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay.
Okay.
So they have a guy, John, to put their chop. He pulled out his chop, and then in handwriting, because the local officials wield a fair amount of power, and he wrote Tongyi. Okay, he wrote Tongyi. Andrew, you can picture that, right?
Yes, he's given it his blessing.
There we go. Tongyi, that means I agree. And what it meant was that he allowed me to offload the pipes, which were going to be the sprinkler system for building this project, and did not give us demurrage, did not give us a black mark, did not give us penalties and fines and so on. But he said, because we had already built up this relationship of Hushuang Zunzhong, of mutual respect, And we also had gone through the rituals of getting to know one another. And what he did is he said, Robert, they used to call me when I was younger, Finn might appreciate this. They used to call me Xiao Fei. Finn. Now, when I was Xiao Fei was when I was younger and still had hair. Then slowly as I became older, they would call me Da Fei. And then finally now they call me Lao Fei. And one of the things that happens in China, TL, as you know, is they really respect the elders and everybody is referred to as a family member. Correct, TL?
Yeah, it's a nice feeling.
Yes, they call you Susu, that means uncle. They call you Gugu, they call you big brother, they call you Jie or Mei Mei. Even you're not, they're referred to you as a family member. And actually the relations in the family are quite complex, where they, depending if it's your mother's younger sister's husband or your mother's older sister's husband, there's different terms that are very quite complex in the Chinese relations. Whereas in English, we just have mother, father, auntie, uncle, cousin, and you're pretty much done. Whereas not only are the relations more complex and more specific, I had a buddy from Beijing sitting with a buddy from Shanghai, sitting with a buddy from Guangzhou, and we were having a dinner together. And I said to them, guys, you know, I've been in China forever. I'm pretty good at Chinese. Can you help me understand what these terminologies are about the family members? And they got into an argument because in Shanghai, the words they use to refer to your mother's younger sister's children or husband, and it would be the second one or the third one. It's very, very nuanced, and they have different terms in different dialects of Chinese. So where the Shanghainese would talk about it would be different than the Beijing guy, would be different from the Shanghai guy. That's how important the names and the relations are in China. What happens to me is when I'm riding the subway in Shenzhen, Finn, whenever I see little kids, I always say, Ni hao, xiao pengyo, right?
Yes.
And they always, the mother will always say, Ni kuai jiao lao ye ye ni hao. That means they tell the kids, say hello to old grandpa. And I laugh and I say to the mother, hey, let's not overdo it with respect. My kids aren't even married yet. How can I be a grandpa? Because they revere the elders, and that's the term that they would use. So, sorry, but the finish of that story in Zhuhai is they signed off with the boss saying, Robert, whatever you do, don't get egg on my face. Go and finish the damn paperwork and come back to me to report. But there was that kind of trust. Now we've got a few minutes left here. I was successful in getting a few of the young people to say hello, and I don't give up easily. I'm pretty stubborn. Can the other people at least say hello before we go? Because when I do this talk around the world, what I say to the people is, if I don't have the ability to carry on a dialogue with any of your people, then my speech was a failure. So I've met TL, maybe we can talk. I've met Finn. And the concept, when we talk about the internet, Matt would appreciate this, and we talk about organic growth and SEO, search engine optimizing, and all of that. I find it quite humorous because the Asian approach, and of course they have these similar things with Baidu and Sogo and so on, but the Asian approach to business was that you were building friendships first, and it would either naturally lead to business or not lead to business, and that was fine. So one of the things that I do in my work is I insist on meeting all of my customers face to face. It's a very Chinese thing that I've been weaned on, and it's hard to get rid of it. So when I was in London before COVID, giving a talk about China, I got a phone call the day before from a German potential client. And I said to them, you know, I'd like to meet all of my customers face to face. And they said, okay, when would you like to do that? Well, today would be better. I'm a lot closer to Germany than I would be if I was in China. I'm in London. I'd like to come and see you today. They said, fine, bring it on. I went downstairs in the hotel. I got a taxi to Heathrow Airport, got the next flight on Lufthansa, was invited into the trade show floor. I had 1 hour with their board of directors who had a fancy greeting room. It was a $500 million family business. I told them, guys, I've just got an hour. I explained to them about China, and then I left and got back in time for my speech, and I now do business with them in Beijing. So what I like to impress upon the people, and Matthew, Matt, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here, Robert.
Good. Matt was able to meet me halfway, meaning that I've come on board to do, and I urged the young crowd to have a look. I've come on board to do LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and what else am I missing, Matt?
And YouTube, yeah.
Okay, and YouTube. So I've met him halfway to learn all of these different things and to not push them away. So I urge the younger crowd, and I do this with all my students around the world, that if you can talk to, never mind even talking to me, if you can talk to one another, that's a step in the right direction, meaning it's not all or nothing. And does anybody have any questions? I got a few people to talk, so that was great. Any questions?
I'd love to introduce myself and just say thank you to everybody for being here today. My name's Alyssa, and I am the student marketing coordinator for Pagoda Project. So thank you so much, Robert, for coming on and talking to us today. It's been very interesting, and I'd love to know if anybody has any more questions, because your stories are just so vivid, and I feel like very educational at the same time. So it's been fantastic.
Good. Well, you know, I find that in Asia, and perhaps in Europe too, TL, there's still a bit more of a human touch there, correct or not? Did I lose him? TL?
I feel like that's true, yeah. To a certain
Yeah.
extent, I feel like that's still true.
Okay. So and Finn, what do you think? There's the Chinese style is much more personal, right? You think?
Could you explain your question?
You know, I was just saying that in doing business in China, it's a lot more personal, that you get together, you spend time, you know, all the things we're talking about, right? Very different from America, right?
Yes, because Chinese government will set many platforms for the overseas investor. So maybe we can meet in an exhibition. I don't know how to pronounce this word. 展会 inhibition, right?
Sure. I think that that's
Yes.
good. Now, Alyssa, can you help me that if anybody has questions, is there a way for us to put out my contact details so they can find me?
Yeah, I'll send out a follow-up email with the recording as well, so if anyone wants to watch it back, and I can include your socials and your email in that, if that's what you
Please, no, that would be great. And I've actually had situations where people have reached out to me after. I'm going to tell you a nice story so that I can put, as the Americans say, I can put my money where my mouth is. Okay. So I had a talk with a group of business people in Latin America. They call it the Financial Executives Networking Group. And that included people in Brazil and in Chile, Argentina, and I think Colombia. And I was able to greet the audience and the group in Spanish and in Portuguese. And we had everybody talking. Everybody was sharing stories as if it was around either a coffee table in America or a tea house in China, where they were just getting to know one another. And there wasn't a very specific agenda that, you know, I'm selling you something, it's a podcast, it's a sales pitch. It was just basically getting to know one another and share stories. And 1 year later, I was then contacted by a Mexican running one of the most successful companies for both online and brick and mortar sales of electronics. a guy named Zimmerman from Red Lemon. He then ended up meeting me in Hong Kong, actually during the riots. It was a tough time. It was pretty unstable over there. But he came over. We couldn't meet at the airport because there were bombs and destruction going on with the violent protests by the Democratic Freedom Fighters, whatever. And we ended up meeting downtown in Wan Chai. And it took 2 years down the road that we kept in touch because we had built some rapport together as friends. The next step, if it wouldn't have been for COVID, I would have gone down to Mexico to meet him, to have dinner together, to get to know his colleagues. And what came to pass is then they needed to open up an entity in China. It's called Mirama.io, if you guys want to check it out. They got $400 million of funding. One of the largest online and retailer businesses. And what they do, it's a new field, actually. They take verticals of business and they invest in those verticals who already are successful in online, e-commerce, and brick and mortar to develop their business. So we're now in the process of setting up their entity in China. So it started from people talking to one another and reaching out to one another. So it's hard to do this old style relationship building if I can't even say hello. But I don't want to impose. I know there's a different way of doing things in different styles. But I urge always the young people, you can be great at coding, you can be great at JavaScript, you can be an MIT, Cal Polytech, top of your class programmer, but it's still important to be able to reach out to the other people, and especially so in China. Andrew, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Only that in a time when we obviously have challenges between the two countries, systems, and relationships, both economic and political relationships, are that much more important. And trying to keep communication open is going to be that much more critical.
Very critical. I'm up late at night worrying about the colleagues, and I even am up at night speaking to the U.S. Trade Commissioner to Beijing when she was in quarantine, asking her how she's doing. She's been a guest in my home in Florida with her children before, and just encouraging her. She's saying, "What am I doing here? Why am I here?" She actually speaks Chinese as well, and is getting through the lockdown and very, very patiently hoping to get through this difficult time to keep things moving. I also urge people to understand that America is not going anywhere. China is not going anywhere. And it's so critical to have understanding between the people, because when the two most powerful nations on earth are fighting rather than talking, discussing, negotiating, it's destabilizing for the world, whatever side of the spectrum you're on, keeping the people talking. So I'm a bit tired out. I'm every night keeping people talking and doing this kind of Zoom stuff. I'd much rather be there meeting you guys and having a dinner. I used to, when I went into Florida State, twice a year, we would invite students and professors interested in China. And it was quite interesting. I would invite along professors. They didn't even have to be business professors. They were Chinese or Singaporean or Hong Kong or whatever. We get half a dozen of them together, and many of them had never even met one another. So we get them together, and I get both mainland Chinese students and other students interested in China. And we would do it on around Chinese New Year and around Christmas. And during that time, so the thesis I'm putting out there for the people is that if you reach out to people and you're open-minded, you never know where it's going to lead to. So at the meeting was a marketing professor named Ruby Lee, wonderful Hong Kong woman, who had to go back to Hong Kong because her father was dying of cancer. So she took a year-long visiting professorship at the Baptist University, and she and I met for dim sum. And while we were at the dim sum table, Hong Kong has a special thing that doesn't happen in other places. I don't know, TL, if you experienced that or not, but the concept would be if there's a table that can seat 8 people and there are only 2 of you, 6 random strangers can come and sit down with you, which in America would cause a fist fight. So anyway, I was speaking Cantonese with this marketing professor, and people were quite curious about the Guaylo speaking Cantonese. So they filled up the table with us, and we were having a very animated chat together. Spent several hours with the professor, sharing our life stories. And she then introduced me to a student, and that student was in China working, went on to law school in Hawaii, and then was transferred to Washington, D.C. Now, when I was talking to these people, it was just simply, let's promote cross-cultural understanding, international understanding, and get people to know one another, keep it human. This student, when he went to Washington, D.C., thought of me. His boss was the ex-ambassador to China. And he said, Robert, I'd like you to meet our president. And they set up for me to meet him in Miami. And he and I sat together and shared a dinner. And he said, Robert, you've got a lot to offer. And he introduced me then to a professor at Cambridge University who made a podcast about me. And then recently, the US-China Business Council has written about me in their magazine. Not that I had a specific goal in mind, but the point is almost karma. You know, what you put out there is able to lead to different things that you would have never expected. And it led to all of these different things that can happen, but you have to be communicating with the other people. I even tell my children the same thing. It's very hard to do that by computer. Now, maybe you guys are better at it than me, but I think it's really hard to do that. What do you think, Matt? Did I lose Matt?
No, I'm still here, Robert.
What do you think, Matt?
Honestly, yeah, it can be. I still find it kind of challenging to communicate across like video chat and messaging and emails. It definitely doesn't have the same feel, the same connection as actually sitting down with like a whiteboard and actually working something out, for sure. I think you can talk fine. It's fine to communicate in terms of that, but when you actually want to do something like actually have like a whiteboard and write down ideas, and that there isn't that flow over video chat. But it's okay for just casual like chit chat, you know.
Right. Well, thanks, Matt. Janine, would you like to add anything? Janine, are you there?
Good morning. Hi.
Ça va bien?
Très bien, merci.
Fantastique. Where are you
I
now?
enjoy Toronto, and I enjoy your talk because I'm currently starting to learn Chinese, and they talk
Wonderful.
about intercultural communication.
That's great.
So,
I urge any of you and all of you to reach out. And like I said, because I've been weaned in the Asian style of business, unless people reach out and continue a dialogue, I consider my talk kind of a failure. So anybody who's willing to reach out, I want to encourage. My life's passion has been being a bridge between China and the outside world. And so I try to do that in any way that I can. And have found the journey interesting along the way, more challenging now than ever. But anybody who's interested, Tariq, Janine, please feel free to reach out, and we'll take it from there. Any other questions or suggestions?
I just added you on LinkedIn, Robert. You mentioned getting on LinkedIn, so.
Excellent, excellent. We've been working closely with Rodney for quite a while now because of COVID and the lockdown and so on. And I'm proud to say, because we do keep the relationships going, we have been able to penetrate the US State Department to get our documents approved, even though delayed. And we also have maintained a good relationship with the Chinese embassy in Washington to get things done. So even though it's slower and there's a lot of fighting going on, it's still happening. And when I see that things continue to happen in China, it's quite uplifting for me, because I've spent my whole life promoting understanding between the two countries.
And you're very understanding of our company too, because we're a small company. We have a lot going on. So we're not always quick to get you what you need to do your job. So we appreciate your patience. Yeah.
No, there's no rush at all. Like I said, these guys in Mexico took 2 or 3 years before we started doing things,
Yeah.
but it was very natural. You know, it wasn't pressurized. It wasn't, you
Yeah.
know, wham, bam, thank you, man, yes or no, and, you know, off you go. So being able to do that is so critical. You know, I had the chairman of China Tobacco. We had a meeting with. I had a client from Ashtabula, Ohio, and he was in the space of doing the vaping products. And China Tobacco was considering an acquisition. So we were then invited for kind of a meeting. And I got into the meeting, and there was the board of directors of China Tobacco, which has got to be, Andrew, one of the oldest state-owned enterprises, right? And they still came dressed in their Mao suits, and they had, you know, 4 or 5 of their people. They had the local Joe Kun, you know, the local weekly journal for the tobacco business. They had the local Mi Shuzhang, the local party secretary, and they also had the local television station. And the relations from the two sides were so stiff and distrusting that you could just feel it. But I was able to get up in front of the crowd. I had stayed up all night translating the things into technical Mandarin about what the service offering was. And again, I got up and I greeted them and I said, 同志们,朋友们,各位来宾,你这么热烈欢迎我们,我很感动. And the place went into hysterics that we had broken the ice and the things were flowing much better then. And then we had a banquet together with the chairman of China Tobacco. And I was singing Chinese pop tunes with the chairman of China Tobacco as we had our ganbei from Mao Tai. And I learned a secret over 40 years of having Mao Tai. Maybe Finn will find this funny. If there's a table of 12 at a banquet table, they gang up on you, right? And everybody wants to have a toast with you. And what I would do is I would do a little bit of sleight of hand. They'd fill up my Mao Tai, and I would, because, you know, after the second one, everyone's a little bit woozy anyway. I just had to make sure that there were no fuyu and there were no staff behind me that I got wet. Yes. Anybody else like to introduce themselves or have any comments or anything? No?
So Robert, sounds like the main takeaway is with relationship building, if you can't obviously do it in person and adopt their ceremonial cultures, so to speak, break bread. I've heard you say a couple times.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
so important there.
As far
Very,
as
very important.
as far as doing email, phone, or video calls with China, do you have any recommendations about that when you can't do it in person?
If it's possible to break the ice, to get to know the people a little bit, it's so important. I would say I give myself, I don't know, a C, either a C or a D today on breaking the ice. I got 2 or 3 people to say hello, so I didn't do great. But if you can get people to break the ice and actually talk to one another, it's a really good thing. Above and beyond, okay, guys, we have this problem. What is it? So
Yeah.
when I'm negotiating in and out of Chinese ministries, if I just go straight to the point, whatever it is, the chance for success is nearly 0. So if I'm not able to first, make a little bit of human touch first, then forget it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not going to happen. All
Okay.
of those stories that I told you involve getting to know one another, spending time together, and building some relationship and building trust. So even if you can do a little bit of that on the phone about what's happening in their personal life, how are the kids doing? How is this? How is that? And I'm happy to help you, Rodney, on doing any of that that you need.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
if you
no,
tell me-
thanks. That's helpful. I have two companies I work with over there. One, I have a pretty good relationship and they always tell me happy weekend is how they say it. And then another one just straight business. And because I haven't really
Okay,
got to
yeah.
know them as good.
So
yet.
if you can, it makes a huge difference
Yeah.
to the point where knowing different dialects of Chinese can also make a big difference, because if I'm negotiating a project in Shanghai and I speak Shanghainese, then not only have you shown respect to Chinese culture, you become part of the family, right? So in terms of this concept of respect and giving face and so on, my wife's ancestral village in Bao'an County, again, was just a fishing village, peasant farming with the curlicue roofs, where the houses inside had a ladder, and they would pull up the ladder and cover up the hatch if bandits came. And I had been there several times. I was invited as the only foreigner for her cousin's wedding. And I hadn't seen him for many years since the wedding. And I had a call from a client from Colorado doing lighting systems in Guangdong province. And he was having some terrible trouble. And he said, Robert, you got to come and help me. So he gave me the address, and I went to meet him at the factory and meet the factory owners and negotiate things and get people talking. And I realized that I was across the street from my wife's ancestral village, where I hadn't been for maybe 20 years since the wedding. So I called back to Hong Kong, where they had moved to, and I got the name of her cousin and his phone number, and I called him up, and I said, hey, Aping, you remember me? Yes, I do. Where are you now? I said, well, I'm across the street from the village. He said, what time are you off of work? I said, well, that would be this afternoon, 5 o'clock. He said, well, I'll be there. Now imagine 40 years ago, it was literally just dirt roads and old pagoda houses and peasant farming. And since then, it's this massive city. You know, a small city in China is 3, 4, 5 million, right? It's a small city. So he came in his latest Mercedes-Benz SUV to pick me up. He had pre-checked me into the fanciest Marriott hotel with the room key. He brought me up and he said, well, you should just freshen up now and I'll come back and get you. Half an hour later, he came and he brought me into a very fancy banquet hall. Now, try in America without advance notice and a schedule to get all of your relatives together on a moment's notice. Forget about it. Jimmy's got soccer practice. He has kung fu. He has extra math lessons. He's got music lessons, whatever. It's a very rigid schedule. You don't break your schedule, and it doesn't really matter who it is. I arrived, and the 80-year-old matriarch of the village was waiting for me, gave me a huge bear hug, and held my arm as I walked her in to the banquet hall where there was 25 of the villagers all waiting for me with a 15-course banquet. I mean, it's I can't compare and contrast that even with my own family in America. They probably wouldn't even pick you up at the airport, right? Hop a cab, right? So there
Yeah.
you go.
Wow.
Any other questions, Alyssa?
I don't
No?
think so. You've been very thorough, Robert. So thank you so much. This has been wonderful. If there aren't any more questions, I'll make sure to email this.
Just make one comment.
Please, go ahead,
That's
Paul.
actually, that's one story I haven't heard, Bob. That's very good.
All right. Very, very good. And I urge both the business people and the students to please reach out, because it is my passion to do that. I was in a Home Depot last week, you know, a hardware store, and I came across a Chinese woman and I greeted her and we spoke together, and she couldn't speak English. She worked at a Chinese restaurant and she couldn't find what she needed in the hardware store. She asked, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Of course I can help you." And I spent half an hour going up and down the aisles asking people to get what she needed. And she was overwhelmed that somebody actually showed a little bit of kindness and politeness in this crazy world. So for everybody to keep in mind, doing a little bit to reach out to people, give a smile, say hello. You never know how much you can affect somebody's day, somebody's mood, and how things might happen that you'd never expect.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're a little bit over, so I'll go ahead and end now so everyone can get back to the rest of their days or evenings, depending on where you are in the world.
Sure.
But thank you so much, and we hope to see you at the next event. Have a good day, everybody.
Okay, thanks
Thanks,
very
Robert.
much. I appreciate your inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share some of the stories. Hopefully that helps to create some cross-cultural awareness. And I'm very happy to help either businesses or students or whoever needs help. That's kind of my passion.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, especially Robert. It's been great. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, thanks, guys.
Okay.